all that everybody that's smart seems to talk about the Soviet Union and lessons that come out of communism and stuff. Lots of people, the Lexes and the Petersons of the world or whatever, seem to draw a lot of lessons from this. I frankly didn't know much about it. Like if you'd held a gun to my head and said, tell me when the Berlin Wall fell, or tell me who the main characters were in the decline of communism between the UK, America, and the Soviet Union, I wouldn't have known. So it has been a little bit like like a fast track education through some pretty brutal elements of history.
I didn't know it either. When I sat down to write this, I didn't know any of it. I didn't know why it was such a big deal that the Berlin Wall fell and what that meant. I knew I was born in the Soviet Union, but I left when I was like 1.5. So obviously I don't remember it in any sense. And though, we were raised in my household with kind of Soviet inspired values, for lack of a better term, I still had no good idea of what it meant when it fell, how bad it was, what are the lessons, none of that. And I still don't have a good answer as to why the Cold War, which was the absolute primary foreign policy concern for over half a century for the West, is like forgotten. I don't know how to reconcile those two things, because starting from, very quickly after the end of World War II up through 91, all foreign policy, whether in Britain, Germany, West Germany, the US, this was the filter. This was the big concern. How is this person going to address the Cold War if you're talking about a prime minister, a chancellor, or a president? And if you ask people who Brezhnev is, right, who ran the Soviet Union for close to 20 years, what percent of educated, well-read people, now people who are a little older than us will know who he is. It's a tiny percentage. And so when writing this, I still don't have an understanding as to why it kind of fell on my shoulders, because this isn't some hipster band that you probably haven't heard of. This was the Cold War. And yet now, if you talk about it, they're like, oh yeah, wasn't that on like Labrador Records?
Kitschy history type thing.
Yeah. And it's like, this is millions of people in many countries over decades suffering things that all of us listening to this, and everyone listening to this is in at least a semi-free country, would find unimaginable. Just even the one aspect of the idea of knowing that whenever you're on the phone, it's tapped, how that would affect your phone calls. Knowing now, we have that here in the sense of the NSA, but not to the extent where, like, if I'm texting you and I'm making a joke about Trump or Biden, I have to worry. Not
the knock at the door
in the middle of the night. Or am I going to get fired? Am I just going to be sat down by the authorities and be like, what did this email mean? How do you know Chris? Who else have you talked about these things with, Chris? And I can't complain to anyone, because if I'm complaining, I'm only going to make it worse. We can't wrap our heads around what that kind of lifestyle is like. And this was the norm for a lot of people. And that's even the easiest part to deal with. You just don't talk politics. But the rest of it, it's just was so pervasive and extensive and for so long and for so many people. And I don't understand how this, the New York Times has the 1619 Project, which focuses on things which we can all agree are a major historical concern. The slave trade, is obviously a historical abomination. So the subject matter, at least, is important, even if their spin on it, is a certain skew. But this is something that's just not discussed. And I don't even have a hypothesis as to, I do have a hypothesis. The hypothesis is there's not an easy narrative, right? I had to find this narrative. It's not an easy story of, it's okay, they're the bad guys, but then why are we teaming up with them in World War II? And who are the good guys? Are they Reagan? But is it really Reagan and Thatcher? Because, they weren't entirely the heroes in the eyes of the press. So when you don't have, like, the Vietnam War is or the Korean War is called a forgotten war because it was a stalemate, right? So since there's no narrative and you can't make it into Hollywood where it's like good wins over evil, they just stop talking about it. And when you stop talking about it, you're ignoring what happened to untold numbers of men, women, and children who had to suffer needlessly. and who are now being forgotten. And I'm like, I'm going to do something about that.
The complexity of the truth is inconvenient for both sides.
Yes.
Yeah.
Weird. Y'all so stupid. Why are y'all so stupid? Get better problems, I swear to God that y'all want them. Y'all so dumb. People so stupid. People so dumb. People so boo-hoo, wah, wah, wah. Get better issues, we're gonna run out of tissues. It's so dumb.